He says, "You're not going to die, and it's bigger than you."
In the process of getting the transplant, in the next hour?
It didn't rattle me. It didn't shake me. It didn't make me feel hopeless.
How did it affect you when you found out mommy was going to lose her hair, baby?
I was kind of upset, but I kind of had to understand that this is what's gonna help her.
I didn't even honestly know that this is how I was supposed to feel, because it became normal feeling the way I previously felt. And I just thought, hey, that's just life of a busy person. She says, "Your blood work has come back and your doctor is sending you to an oncologist." And so I was like, wait, hold on. I was like, let me pull over. And so I actually pulled over into a parking lot because I was like, did I hear you correctly? Like, you're referring me to an oncologist?
I just got released to go.
Fatigue, extreme fatigue. And at the time, like I told you earlier, I am a business owner. So I've been doing that for over 15 years. I was doing lots of traveling. I was just busy, busy, busy all the time. And so it was time for my routine checkup with my physician. And I just mentioned to him, I was like, hey, I've just been really, really, really tired. And at first he kind of brushed it off. He was like, well, you do a lot, maybe it's, and I was like, no, this is a different kind of tired. And so he said, well, we'll just run some extra blood work just to, check maybe your nutrient levels, maybe you're low in B12 or something. And that was not the case. Basically, when I would get home, I normally, would tend to our daughter who was young, very young at the time. I would, maybe fix food, fix dinner, just kind of hang out around the house. And no, I was just like, I just want to go straight to bed. And so that's why I knew, I was like, this is a different tired. It's just I don't even have the energy to do anything except go straight to bed. She says, your blood work has come back and your doctor is sending you to an oncologist. And so I was like, wait, hold on. I was like, let me pull over. And so I actually pulled over into a parking lot because I was like, did I hear you correctly? Like, you're referring me to an oncologist? And she was like, yes. And I was like, why? And she was like, your platelet counts were extremely high. And I said, well, what is extremely high? And she said they were in the millions. And I said, okay, so what does that mean? And she says, well, we're not quite sure. That's why he's referring you to an oncologist. And the journey began from there. Once I actually arrived to my oncologist appointment, the first thing, most oncologists want to do is a bone marrow biopsy to figure out what's going on in the marrow. And so she came back and she said, well, I think this is what it is. And so one of the things that was a little alarming for me at that time, she said, well, you're fairly young. And, most of the time we don't see this present in people of your age. And so I was like, okay. And in that moment, I didn't really feel like there was more that she was willing to do to, because one of the things she asked me, she said, do you and your husband still want to potentially have another child? And I was like, yes, because at that time, I think I was like maybe 34, 35. And so I was like, absolutely. And so I was like, are there other options than what she was presenting to me? And I didn't feel like she wanted to explore any other options, because I'm like, apparently I'm a unique case because you said so, that usually persons of my age don't present with this issue. So there's a JAK2 mutation that was in my blood that was causing this blood disorder, the ET, to happen. And so for me, I just had a lot of questions. I don't even think I had like an emotion. I was just very inquisitive. Like, well, how does this happen? How do you get the mutation? Like I was just like in question mode. And so for me, it was just a little frustrating because I couldn't get any direct answers. Ultimately, they just landed on you were born with this mutation. And so my next question was, well, if I was born with this mutation, why did it express itself at this point in time in my life? Like, what made it express itself? If it's been in my DNA this entire time, why did it express itself at this time? And no one could give me an answer. And so I think probably I would say, if any feeling, it was just frustration of not understanding how this could happen. I ended up at Emory Hospital in Atlanta. And at that time, the oncologist there felt as if I would do better on another medication that was fairly new to the oncology world. It had just came out of clinical trials, but it was showing very positive results. And so he said, I think you would fare better on this. And so that's what I did. And, I felt well. I took the medication for about a year and a half, and I started, feeling much better, even to the point where my numbers had started leveling out. The platelet counts had come down, way, way down, and they were in normal range. At that time, I think in your mind, you just want to survive. You just want to survive. You just want things to get better. At least that was my thought process. I didn't lean too heavily into, well, what could be the complications? What could be, I didn't, because sometimes I know myself, if I read too much into all of those things, it then could create a roadblock for me, because now my mind is shifting to all of these other things. And so I just didn't want to go down that road too heavily. Of course, I read up on some things, but I think I just wanted to live. There wasn't any tracking, but I was made aware that there could potentially be a progression of the disease. But once I was like a year out and I was feeling well, everything seemed okay. Honestly, it never even crossed my mind that, hey, something worse could come down the pipe. It just did not cross my mind. I just went back to living life and, jumping full-fledged into, entrepreneurship and my family, and wasn't looking back. Once again, the biggest was fatigue. That was the biggest presenting symptom. And then the stomach pains. And now, looking back, I know that was my spleen that was enlarged, that was causing the pain in my stomach. But once again, I was just not connecting the dots. I wasn't equating. I thought they were two isolated things, like neither one of them meant that I had cancer. You know, I just thought they were independent of each other. And so I just kind of just kept going on and giving my own self-diagnosis of what I thought was going on until it just became too much to bear, that I was like, okay, something needs to be looked at. I had developed dizziness. And so maybe about 2 weeks prior to the actual diagnosis, I had started getting really dizzy. I felt like I was going to pass out. And I remember calling my husband. I was like, I think I'm going to have to go to a walk-in clinic or somewhere tomorrow because I'm just still getting dizzy. And then later on, I had that sharp pain in my stomach again. And so I was like, okay, yeah, something is up. And so the next morning I get up, I find out what time they open, and I was like, I want to be the first person in. That morning, I wasn't really dealing with any dizziness. It was the pain in the stomach that was more presenting that day. So I was like, okay, well, maybe I have a bacterial in my stomach or my gut or something. And so when I go to the clinic, and I'm explaining to the doctor my symptoms. And so she was like, well, hey, well, maybe we'll just test you for H. pylori, make sure, you know, you don't have that. And she was like, but let's just run some blood work just to rule out anything. And that was the best thing that she could have ever done for me. And she called me the next day and she's like, hey, your labs came back and all your blood levels are dangerously low. She says, I don't even know how you're functioning. You need to go to the emergency room right now. They're probably going to give you a blood transfusion. I get to the emergency room. Thankfully, they were very attentive when I showed them the lab work that the doctor had emailed me. They immediately take me back. After they drew the lab work there, the doctor just comes back in and she was like, no, this is cancer. She was like, you have cancer. And I mean, it was just that blatantly. She was like, you have cancer. And I was like, okay, you know, and by this time my mom had, because my husband brought me to the ER, and my mom had driven up from Georgia to be with me. And her and my husband and I, we're all like just looking at each other like, okay, okay, if this is it, this is it. This is what we've been dealt right now. One of the oncologists that I had previously saw, he was actually on call at the ER the very day that I went. He comes in, he remembers me. He totally takes over my care completely. He shifts me from one hospital to another hospital that he felt would be able to serve my circumstances better. He jumps right in, orders the bone marrow biopsy. He comes back and he says, you know, it's myelofibrosis. Was calling family, close friends, and so they were coming to visit, and they were just like, you're so calm. And I was like, there's no other way to describe it except for it's just the peace of God. I literally had a peace that I don't even know where it came from, you know, except from him, because I knew that it was serious, but it didn't rattle me. It didn't shake me. It didn't make me feel hopeless. You know, I just felt that, okay, you've been through ET. You can make it through this one. One night when I was in the hospital and I was there by myself and I was lying in the bed, hospital bed, and I was just talking to God. I was just like, okay, we're going through this, and it's making me a little emotional thinking about it. And he says, you're not going to die, and it's bigger than you. He immediately puts me on the national donors list because he then informs me that he feels like in order for me to live, that I needed to have a bone marrow transplant because my bone marrow, I was in complete bone marrow failure at that point. And so my body was not making any blood cells at all. And so that's why my blood levels were so dangerously low. It wasn't until I had a visit that my oncologist had set up with the transplant surgeon. And the transplant surgeon was the one who then said to me, we are very hopeful, that you can get a donor, but here is the statistics and here are the facts that African Americans make up the lowest percentage on the national registry. And because of that, it then creates your chances of finding a donor. It kind of makes it a longer stretch. So he said it could potentially be 2 to 3 years because we just don't have enough pool of people to pull from. And so that was just kind of like just stop you dead in your tracks, because then you have this hope like, okay, I can get a donor, but then it's like, yeah, you can get a donor, but the chances are very slim just based upon the statistics. And so I say to him in that moment, well, what can I do to help? How do we get more African Americans, Blacks to sign up to get on the registry? Well, it was, by God's grace, 2.5 months later that I received a phone call. I answer it, and she confirms that it's me on the phone, and she says, I think we have potentially found a donor for you. And my mouth just fly open, and my husband's like, what? And it was just like a surreal moment, because in my head, I had 2 to 3 years. That's what I was thinking. It may take 2 to 3 years. So to hear in that moment when she says, I think we found you a donor, I was like, what? Unbelievable.
Try to hold on to any form of hope that you can find.
Yeah.
Any beacon of light, anything that you can be grateful for, find gratefulness in everything. Even if you're just grateful for the nurses, or you're grateful for the machine that's pumping blood through your body, or whatever. Just always find some kind of beacon of hope to hold on to.
One of the things was they immediately wanted to shrink my spleen. So they put me on a medication to help shrink the spleen and to ease some of the symptoms from the myelofibrosis. And so that was a big help, in addition to then going regularly every 7 to 10 days for the transfusions, because the transfusions then, of course, improved my quality of life. It wasn't as sad as people may think, because my life was, even though it revolved around being in a doctor's office or a hospital every week, it was still, I get to interact with people, I get to talk to people, it was just like, okay, this is my new normal. Once we got close enough to the point where it's, okay, it's final, you're having this transplant, my hair was extremely long. And so our daughter was 10 at the time. And so she didn't fully understand everything, because we just wanted to shield some of the details from her. But I told her, I was like, mommy's going to lose her hair.
Cut a big chunk of it off. And so I decided to let baby girl do the honors of cutting a big chunk of it off.
She was really sad by that, because she loved to always just play in my hair, little girl things.
Ooh.
And so I was like, how do I bring her into a part of this?
Oh my gosh.
And so part of it was I allowed her to cut my hair before going to have the transplant.
Oh my God. She cut her hair.
It's gone.
It's gone.
It doesn't look bad though. Look.
So we recorded it and we shared it on social media.
How you feel? Demetria?
Liberated.
You feel liberated?
Liberated.
Begin to understand, like, this is what God meant when he said it's bigger than you. And so I met so many incredible people through social media. It was beautiful, but I brought her into it so that she could feel like she was a part of it. And I knew that I was going to lose my hair. And so it kind of softened the blow a little bit to see a shorter amount leave your head than, long strands. So mentally, I guess, that's how I prepared myself for, losing all my hair. But outside of that, I just decided, this is the journey. And I just have to be present every day, show up every day, ready for the journey. One of the things that going through this and having a transplant did for me is reprioritize my life. As I stated before, I was just a busy bee. I just, was everywhere doing everything, all good stuff. But sometimes something like this stops you in your tracks and it slows you down, and it completely slowed me down. And then I had time to kind of just reflect on what things are most important now. When you're lying in the bed, you're not thinking about customers, you're thinking about your family, you're thinking about your loved ones. And so I'm like, they are most important to me now. And so it redefined how I show up now and what matters to me the most now. And, how am I going to live my life from this point forward? It changed everything. It's so funny because when I see people out, they say, "Oh my God, you look so good. You look so good." And I always say, "Thank you, but I feel so good. I feeling good is better than looking good." And, they always laugh because I appreciate that I look good, but I appreciate the most that I feel good, and I didn't even honestly know that this is how I was supposed to feel, because it became normal feeling the way I previously felt. And I just thought, hey, that's just life of a busy person, and not even understanding fully that, no, that was not living. Like, your quality of life, even though externally you had a lot of good things, you had businesses, you had all these things, but your health was not the best. And I had just succumbed to the fact that that's how you feel when you're busy. You do a lot, you may not feel the best. And so on this side of it, I'm just amazed because I'm like, I didn't even know that this is how I was supposed to feel. The advice that I would give is that it is not selfish to take care of yourself. The main thing I would say is to hold on to hope. You have to remain hopeful. Hope is the tangible thing that you can hold on to when everything else feels like it's slipping through your fingers. But if you hold on to hope, that is the thing that anchors you to the possibility of me being able to then be healed, be cured, to live on the other side of this thing. And so when you lose hope, as you know, then you have nothing. Hope is the foundation. And I know people say, well, how do you have hope when it looks so daunting? For me, I had to shift into gratefulness. Gratefulness was another key piece that helped me to remain hopeful. Is, of course, nobody's grateful for a diagnosis, but I was grateful that there was a solution at hand. I was grateful that there were people who were willing to do whatever they needed to do to help me on my journey. And so when you began to look at the gratefulness in the midst of the storm, that's where hope can start to shine its head a little bit, and you're like, oh, I do see a little bit of hope, because I am grateful that individuals are helping. I am grateful that, it could have been a lot worse, and I don't know how worse it could get, but it could have been. I do know that, it could have been worse. And so hopefulness is the thing that anchors you to the possibility of more.